Kidnapping children is not what great nations do. We in America are misinformed. Reality shows have warped our idea of what a hero is, or what the truth is.
If you take people like Jay-Z and Pusha T, they made their living killing our people, so how the fuck they gonna stand up? You know what I'm saying? You think they would ever tell the truth? No, if they told the truth, they didn't go to jail. You know what I'm saying? So you have liars.
You know, if you look at an interview from me from 10 years ago, everybody says, I love that interview. People didn't love it back then, though, because I was speaking to the future. I'm 10 years ahead mentally, and I'm trapped in today's time. And every now and then I crack you a smile for 2013, but I'm cracking you a frown for 2023. And I'm focused on what it's going to be. Just mark my words. As I'm Kanye West, you've seen my execution.
Begins by revisiting a period when Kanye West was widely dismissed rather than taken seriously. For years, Kanye made repeated comments suggesting that the music industry protected certain powerful figures while punishing others who spoke out. At the time, these statements were often framed as the ramblings of someone losing control, and mainstream conversations focused more on his behavior than the substance of what he was saying. Interviews from nearly a decade ago resurfaced later, showing Kanye claiming he was speaking to the future, not the present. He argued that the culture wasn't ready to hear what he knew, and that people would only understand years later when patterns became impossible to ignore. The narrator explains that while none of Kanye's claims were supported with direct evidence, the consistency of his message stood out. He wasn't accusing one person in one moment. He was describing an entire system that rewarded silence and punished disruption. As time passed and other high-profile figures began facing public scrutiny, viewers started re-watching those old clips with a different perspective. The question quietly shifted from, why is he saying this, to why do these warnings keep resurfacing whenever another scandal breaks? The narrator then shifts focus to the Epstein case, a story that never truly disappeared but refused to stay buried. While the central facts of the case were known for years, public frustration continued to grow due to sealed documents, limited transparency, and unanswered questions. Pressure from the public intensified as people demanded access to records they believed were deliberately withheld. When discussions about the release of Epstein-related files resurfaced, it reignited widespread outrage. The narrator explains that these files were said to contain millions of documents, emails, travel logs, contact lists, and references to numerous individuals. Importantly, being named in such documents does not automatically imply wrongdoing, yet public trust had already eroded. Many people felt the justice system had previously failed to act decisively, creating the belief that powerful individuals were protected. As a result, when the files were discussed again, the reaction was immediate and intense. The story wasn't just about Epstein anymore. It became about who else might have known, who might have been nearby, and who always seemed to avoid consequences. This renewed attention turned the case into a cultural flashpoint rather than a closed chapter.
At this point, the narrator introduces the moment that triggered the strongest reaction online. Among the many names circulating in discussions surrounding the Epstein files, one stood out as especially unexpected: Jay-Z. According to public discourse, his name appeared in conversations tied to the documents, not as a confirmed participant, but as a mention that raised eyebrows. The narrator emphasizes a critical distinction. Mention does not equal guilt. There has been no public proof or legal ruling establishing wrongdoing. Still, the reaction was explosive. Jay-Z had long been viewed as a figure who successfully navigated past controversy, transforming his image into that of a respected businessman and cultural leader. Because of this reputation, even indirect association shocked many people. The narrator explains that public perception often operates on emotion rather than legal standards. For some, the question wasn't whether he was guilty, but why his name surfaced at all in such a sensitive context. That uncertainty fueled speculation, debate, and deep mistrust, illustrating how quickly narratives form once confidence in institutions collapses.
The narrator then explains how public attention naturally shifted toward Jay-Z's long-standing association with Diddy. Their professional and social relationship had been well known for decades, but it was rarely questioned until other major figures in entertainment began facing serious allegations. Once that happened, people started revisiting old connections with new skepticism. The narrator notes that this wasn't driven by new evidence, but by perceived patterns. Viewers asked why some figures appeared to fall rapidly, while others remained untouched. This sense of imbalance created a belief that survival within the industry wasn't random. Online discussions framed this as a system where influence mattered more than accountability. The narrator makes it clear that these are interpretations formed by the public, not confirmed facts. Still, the silence from those involved allowed these theories to grow. The lack of explanation left room for imagination, and imagination filled the gaps faster than verified information ever could.
The narrator moves on to explain how the controversy expanded beyond its original scope. As the conversation grew louder, older interviews, comedy clips, and music industry anecdotes resurfaced. Statements made years earlier by various artists and public figures were suddenly re-examined. Some spoke vaguely about pressure, secrecy, or strange expectations within the industry. Others hinted at experiences they never fully explained. One of the most discussed examples involved MIA, whose past comments were reframed as part of a larger narrative. The narrator stresses that none of these claims were proven, nor were they presented with evidence at the time. However, when multiple unverified statements are compiled together, they can appear to support a broader theory. Social media accelerated this process, connecting dots whether they truly belonged together or not. The result was a story shaped more by accumulation than confirmation, where speculation gained strength through repetition rather than proof. The narrator then explains how public attention naturally shifted toward Jay-Z's long-standing association with Diddy. Their professional and social relationship had been well known for decades, but it was rarely questioned until other major figures in entertainment began facing serious allegations. Once that happened, people started revisiting old connections with new skepticism. The narrator notes that this wasn't driven by new evidence, but by perceived patterns. Viewers asked why some figures appeared to fall rapidly, while others remained untouched. This sense of imbalance created a belief that survival within the industry wasn't random. Online discussions framed this as a system where influence mattered more than accountability. The narrator makes it clear that these are interpretations formed by the public, not confirmed facts. Still, the silence from those involved allowed these theories to grow. The lack of explanation left room for imagination, and imagination filled the gaps faster than verified information ever could.
Next, the narrator focuses on how the media's response, or lack thereof, fueled public suspicion. Some posts discussing the situation were reportedly removed, while others received little to no follow-up coverage. To many viewers, this silence felt intentional. The narrator explains that in highly charged situations, absence of commentary is often interpreted as avoidance or suppression. When certain celebrities rushed to defend Jay-Z, it only intensified the debate. Instead of calming the situation, these defenses caused audiences to question motives and credibility. The narrator avoids asserting manipulation, but explains how perception works. When transparency is missing, trust erodes. In that environment, even neutral actions can appear calculated. This dynamic turned silence into a central character in the story, one that spoke louder than statements ever could.
The narrator introduces a contrasting perspective that challenges the dominant narrative. Some argue that the Epstein files are vast and complex, containing references that do not imply involvement. Being named in documents does not mean participation, just as knowing someone does not make a person responsible for their actions. This viewpoint warns against turning suspicion into assumed guilt. The narrator highlights how media-driven outrage can distract from verified facts and turn serious issues into entertainment. Instead of uncovering truth, the focus shifts to spectacle. The story concludes not with a verdict, but with a question. In a world where power, influence, and information are deeply intertwined, how does the public separate fact from rumor, accountability from assumption, and justice from noise? The narrator leaves that judgment to the viewer.